it's going to be a disaster situation.
No private citizen is going to put out hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to fix up a rundown building.
Good morning and welcome to the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Beekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. Get more out of your home and book a free consultation today online, LegalSecondSuites.com. Not only is Mr. Beekendam in studio with us, so too is a special guest. You know him, you love him, Rob Golfi, sales representative, Remax Escarpment Realty, the Golfi team. Ken, Rob, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Rick. It's great to be here. It's great to be in Hamilton. It's great to be, working in the city, helping people create, legal second dwelling units in their homes, ADUs in their backyards, converting garages, whatever space that we think that we can add a unit. We are out there. We are doing it. It's an exciting time to be in this industry.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Rick and Ken. It's great to actually meet you in person with Legal Seconds. I love it. I always hear everything good things about you, so that's awesome. I'm glad to be here.
Nice. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, including Hamilton's new Renovation Bylaw. We'll get into additional dwelling units, which both of you are very familiar with, building new homes, including a very interesting story coming out of Toronto in regards to Leon's. Real estate garage units. Maybe we'll start with, you want to start with the Renovation Bylaw? It's making some big waves nowadays.
Yeah, it's been obviously talked about for a while. And now we're starting to see Hamilton actually, taking steps forward with this new bylaw, which is going to be very interesting to see how it kind of plays out over the long term. We see, yes, in the short term, this immediate crisis that we have with homelessness and kind of people not being able to find an affordable place to live and kind of being forced out onto the streets. But the challenge is we also have an aging infrastructure. We have aging buildings. We have Hamilton is ripe with old, rundown apartment buildings, right? And these buildings do require investments in order to not only maintain them, but also improve them so that everybody can kind of have a higher standard of living. But when it's very challenging to get a building vacant in order to complete those required renovations, it's very challenging for a building owner or developer to do what they need to do.
For those who are unfamiliar with the new bylaw, so landlords now have to purchase or apply for a license that's going to cost $715 per unit to renovate that unit and have obviously the tenant leave during the renovations, and then the tenant has the first right of refusal to come back. Some landlords are saying that's just too pricey for me. I can't do that, and might just leave their units in disrepair.
Well, that's exactly what's going to happen, is because, no private citizen is going to put out hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to fix up a rundown building and not expect any sort of return on that capital. They're not going to want to see a negative return on that capital. So it's very problematic in my eyes that, it's a disincentive to investing in buildings and houses to get them fixed up.
Yeah, it does, if anything. There's a little bit of peace of mind, I think, for the tenant in some respects, because there's not, they're not getting thrown out and having, forced to look for a new place to go. There's a lot of chaos that comes with that. But in the same sense, if their unit is falling into disrepair, there certainly has to be something done. Rob, what's your take on this new renovation bylaw?
I think it's gonna be a disaster situation, because we already got 10-month wait for the landlord-tenant board for any resolution to be for them to go to court. And so now we're leaving the city up to them to and also the city to let us know that if it's okay to renovate or not. So how long is that going to take? So let's say something does need renovations. That may take a long time to get an approval, but also you're going to see a lot of landlords just let units run down and just say, well, listen, we're just, we're not going to pay the $700. They're going to just do patchwork. They're just going to do minimal amount of work because they don't want to pay that $700 for a full renovation.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this, and Ken, we'll start with you on this one. Do you think, there's a lot of red tape in the process of becoming a landlord right now. Is this another thing that's going to decentivize potential landlords, mom and pop homeowners, those who own, 4 pads or whatever the case is? Will this, be another thing for them to say, you know what, I'm just getting out of this game?
100% it is. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And here in Hamilton, it's getting increasingly worse. We have a renovation bylaw, we have short-term rental bylaws, we have rental licensing now. God forbid, trying to get a building permit in the city takes months and months and months, even for very simple renovations. We have increasing property taxes, increasing water rates, you name it. It's coming from Hamilton, and it makes it very difficult for a housing provider to continue to operate in this city. When, look, there's options out there for those that have capital, those that own buildings and have the means and the ability and the skill set to create housing. There's options for these guys to go elsewhere. And I'm telling you, I'm seeing it in my network all the time. There's guys that are leaving Ontario, they're selling, they're liquidating stuff here in Ontario, and they're moving all of their capital down south to the southern U.S. Sunbelt in more business, landlord-friendly environments. But we need investment here in Ontario, but we're doing it to ourselves. We're making it worse.
Yeah. Rob, are you seeing this too?
Yeah. You know what? If we lose the mom and pop investor that buys the homes, they are the best landlords to have because they have sympathy. They understand the tenant and they work with the tenant and they give a lot of breaks for tenants. Now, if they walk away and we just have corporate investment, there is no emotions, nothing, and everything's black and white, and the tenant will have a hard time. It's not going to be as easy. So the small investor, if we lose them, it's going to be tougher out there for tenants. And you know what? And that's how a lot of these old investors, these mom and pop investors, they had a tenant move in, and if they paid their rent on time, they never increased the rent. They just said, hey, they were just happy. Hey, you pay me the rent. I'm never going to increase your rent. Yeah. But we're going to lose all those investors, those mom and pop investors, because of all this stuff that's happening.
Ken, this idea originally started in Westminster, BC, and it was a big success from certainly a tenant perspective, and basically eradicated renovictions in that community, so much so that the province of British Columbia said, we're going to institute this province-wide. Do you, in your circles, in your network, is this a worry that it could go to all of Ontario and everyone might be in the same boat?
Absolutely it will. This is 100% political. It's low-hanging fruit for a politician to go after those that have capital and those that own houses and own buildings, because politically it's easy, okay? It's easy for them because all they have to do is pass a bylaw and it looks like they're doing something good for Ontario and creating housing, when in fact it has the complete opposite effect if you really look at the data and the stats. And as far as I understand, I think BC rescinded that bylaw, did they not?
It was rescinded in Westminster because the province was doing it as a whole. So province-wide, it's in effect in BC.
And look what's happening in BC when it comes to rent rates, right? It hasn't made a lick of a difference. Yeah. It made it even more expensive out there because why? Because there's not as much investment happening because guys are pulling out. They're not spending the money because they're not seeing a return on their capital and their capital is not protected.
Yeah. And for rental rates to go down, we need more supply.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. 100%. Like, CMHC says we need $1 trillion across the country to restore housing affordability. And look what our government has, allocated to housing, like $75 billion. And there's $4 billion in this housing accelerator fund, which only a few $100 million has actually been allocated to projects. So they're so far out to lunch. They need private sector investment. They need to incentivize the private sector, mom and pop landlords, medium-sized investors, even the big guys, to go out there and create housing. I'm so advocating for a $40,000 no strings attached grant for a homeowner, an owner-occupied homeowner, to put in a legal second dwelling in their home. Why? Because when it costs our government probably $400,000 to $500,000 to create an affordable housing unit, where we can convert, a basement for $130,000. And so if our governments were to cover a third of that cost, $40,000, it's way better money spent. And what it does, it brings financial power back to the people because, anytime we have a homeowner who has a legal second dwelling in their home, they're getting that monthly rental income, their life is more financially stable. And we've talked about it many times on the show. Like my wife and I, we started out with a simple little basement apartment. And it really made for a stable life for us, just having that little bit of income coming in. So, it's definitely something that our governments need to be looking at.
We have 2.5 minutes left in this segment. Is what is happening at the Landlord Tenant Board and some of the horror stories that we're hearing, even with that grant, which would be phenomenal, would that dissuade some people from saying, I don't want to deal with a tenant in my home who may never want to leave?
Well, yes, it's still like, the cost of construction, creating that unit is one aspect. It's also the long-term, issue that, our homeowners' property rights are kind of being taken away from them when they have somebody living in their property that they can't remove when they stop paying their rent. Like, what other service industry can you go to and you don't pay your bill and there's no repercussions, or it takes like a year or 2 years to get justice? It's only happening in the housing sector. You can't go into a restaurant, order a nice meal, and then just walk out and say, you know what, I'm not going to pay the bill. But then
take me to court for
But then decide to sleep there overnight and get served breakfast in the morning and lunch and dinner, and you stay there all week long or all month long, and totally taking advantage of the restaurant owner. Like, it's like, how's this fair?
Yeah, it is a sticky wicket, that is for sure. When we come back in our next segment, we're going to get into a number of other topics, including what is a very interesting story in Toronto. This was just announced the other day, and it falls under the umbrella of building new homes. This is Leon's. Leon's, the furniture store, which owns the brick, and you can go into your local Leon's today to pick up a new couch or stove or microwave, whatever the case is. Well, they're also getting into the home building business. They have a headquarters in Toronto, and what they have come up with is a plan to rezone some of that land, build a new headquarters, a new Leon's store, and then around it, a lot of homes, 4,000 homes, which obviously is going to impact supply and demand, but is this where we're going? We're having private entities building homes because developers can't, or they can't get the lands rezoned. It's a very interesting topic that we'll get to. So let's get into this really interesting story in Toronto. Here's Leon's, furniture store behemoth in this country, is proposing, or at least this is going forward, to rezone the land around its headquarters in Toronto. And then not only build a new store, but phase 2 of this project is to build 4,000 homes in Toronto. Rob, would you be excited about this as a real estate agent?
Well, there's 4,000 new homes going up for that will be sold. Eventually, there'll be resale homes down the road. We do need homes. Where there is a shortage of homes, and they probably got the zoning change because of the fact that where Leon's was, usually they go in remote areas, and then finally population kind of filled in towards where the location is, just like Canada's Wonderland. I mean, there's residential homes all the way around it, but when they first built it,
that was the only thing.
It was in the middle of nowhere. But Leon's has got the money and they've got the property, and they're getting into the home building business. They know it's a profitable and big business. So I think and the land alone they probably bought for next to nothing. Who knows how many years ago? So now the value of the land, if it's in Toronto, it's probably worth $2+ million an acre or more, and so they're going to profit from that big time and relocate their next Leon's someplace else where it's also a remote area, which it'll fill in
do it
eventually.
all over again.
20, 30 years from now.
Wow, Ken, are you excited about this?
Yeah, good for Leon's. Obviously there's a reason why they're doing this. Who knows? Maybe the furniture business is on a decline, right? Not as many homes
they're looking
being
at real
sold,
estate.
not as many people needing to buy new furniture, right? And they're probably looking at this. Obviously, they're looking at us from a business opportunity. Why else would they be doing it? It's obviously there's an incentive there for them to do it. They got the land, they got the space. There's the demand for housing, so good on them. I think it's good. We need some more of these big corporate players who do have a lot of capital and they're sitting on prime real estate, to take a look at their holdings, take a look at their existing buildings that they have and see, is there a way that we can redevelop this? Keep the Leon's furniture store on the ground floor, but then, put a 20-story tower above it.
Right.
Why not?
Is this the next big thing? Like Leon's, I don't know, pick your company.
They're sitting on a lot of land. You've got clubs like the Italian clubs that built these like they're clubs, like the Italian clubs, Serbian clubs, and
Like little banquet
Croatian
centers.
banquet centers.
Yeah.
So they built them way out in the middle of nowhere when they first started. Now they're starting. Builders are approaching them and want to buy up their property because it's filled in. And I know a Greek hall that's up in Smithville. There's builders knocking on their door. There's also I think a Serbian hall in Stony Creek. There's all these different halls that are being eaten up by developers, and they're getting tremendous amount of money for their land, and they're relocating their halls or their clubs to another remote area, and probably in 30 to 40 years again they'll be able to cash in and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah, like there's tremendous opportunity for infill development, within our urban boundaries. Like, not to get into the whole greenbelt thing and expanding the urban boundary, but like just look around. We have so many like kind of vacant, underutilized buildings, plots of land that could easily be, redeveloped. And, it's the municipalities and the province have made great strides so far in, making zoning more permissive to allow these types of developments to proceed. There's still more work to be done, absolutely, to kind of clean up the process so that it's much quicker. But yeah, like it's ripe for opportunity out here in Ontario for redevelopment. But we do need proper protections for those developments to proceed. And by protections, I mean protections at the landlord-tenant board.
Right. Would also some of those protections be height restrictions? Because that's always a hot debate in Hamilton, whether you're in Dundas, especially Ancaster. We're seeing a few high rises in Grimsby, Lower Stony Creek along the waterfront, because that's just the nature of the beast. Burlington's going to get some. There'll be some on Pier 8 here in Hamilton. Where do you got? Maybe Rob, we'll start with you. Where do you stand on the height restriction?
I think the downtown cores in the small municipalities like Grimsby, they're only allowing so many floors, like four floors, sorry, but they are allowing high rises in everywhere. They're going high on the height of the buildings, and I think it's just open for everywhere to do that. There used to be a small limit, and I remember one property in Grimsby on Kerman Avenue. There was a condo development there, and I think it was only 3 floors. That was it.
Wow.
It was 3 floors. Now they're going higher on the amount of floors that you can go. We need the development, and I think the small municipalities at first they were a little bit hesitant, but now everybody's kind of opened the doors and saying, okay, we'll add more floors as long as the facades of the building looks good. It looks great for the downtown core.
Yeah, like it's funny. Like when I drive down and I see a little 5-story, 6-story building, I look at it, especially something that's going up now, like a new constructed building. I look at that building like, oh my gosh, like they could have easily gone up another 10 stories. Like it seems like such a waste of land and lost density that we could have had because of these arbitrary height restrictions. Trying to protect the view of the escarpment. Okay, but what's more important, housing people or the a vista, right? Like would we rather have people living in tents or having a nice vista? Like, come on, we gotta make best use of what we have.
Well, there's one on Main Street just down the road here where I think it's like 5 stories, and you drive past it and think, oh, that's as high as they're going to go, and it's like, wow, I thought they'd go a lot higher, especially on Main Street.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like I think these major corridors, these transit-oriented corridors, especially along obviously transit.
Yeah.
But like these places have to be, zoned for higher density, higher buildings, which I know Hamilton is. Like in their comprehensive new official plan and their zoning bylaws, they're allowing for a lot of increased density along these major traffic corridors, which is great. And so we're going to see, these developments happen over time. But still, right now, it's still very difficult for developers to not only get their projects approved, but like to make them financially feasible, right? Because, Rob, as you know, like housing prices have come down, right? But costs are still very high and elevated, especially with interest rates and the cost to carry land and to carry a project for a number of years to get it built. And so it's like developers are getting very, very squeezed. That's why we're seeing a lot of projects just, being shelved because there's no financial benefit there. Like if even like I have a project going on right now, and the current market right now, like the profit margin is not very big, and we're not like greedy developers. we're just trying to make, a reasonable expectation of profit, and a lot of these projects, like, they're not even 10% profit margin on them.
Wow.
They're smaller than that. And so it's very problematic right now. And that's why we see a lot of stuff just not being built.
Mm-hmm. How would that compare to, let's say, when interest rates were still, 2%? Like, would you see a profit margin of 15%, 20%? Like, what would the difference be compared to back then?
Well, a typical developer for a kind of a standard project is kind of between 12 and 15% profit margin. But obviously that's been dropped dramatically. One, because, home prices have dropped, interest rates have risen, but then also all of the government fees that get applied to a new housing unit, right? Development charges, parkland fees, HST. There's a lot of, the component of government fees that we pay for a new housing unit is very, very high, very, very high. And so it's death by a thousand cuts. Yeah. And, every new regulation that comes out is, it's another disincentive. It's another cut to the developer. And like we just mentioned and talked about, there's options for these guys to go elsewhere. Like, why do we see Lozani Homes going way down south and building subdivisions down there? Because they can't do it here in Ontario. It's too expensive.
Wow. From a real estate perspective, Rob, Ken and I have talked on this show many times about additional dwelling units, garage units, just spaces that people have put in their homes. How much value do you see when that home is put on the market?
Having an additional unit, there is tremendous value. When we walk into a house and it's got an in-law suite downstairs, if it has a separate entrance, like a private entrance, it's like a bonus. Like we're like, oh, this is great, because we know there's a lot of people looking for that, and like we just had one in St. Catharines, and I walked through and I go, wow, this is perfect. This will go fast, because there is a lot of people buying houses. They have kids that, maybe they went through a divorce and they just need a temporary place to live with their parents, and they have their own unit separate. They don't have to, have them walk through their own house. And then the other thing is, I always advocate for people when they're buying a new house, get that second basement entrance. Just have it, even though you may not use it. But I'll tell you, in the long run, and when they resell down the road, it'll be easier to resell it, just because of the fact they have a separate entrance to the basement, that anybody can convert that basement into a legal unit, to an apartment downstairs.
And when individuals are listing their home, they're identifying that listen, there is a in-law suite, there is a secondary suite, wherever the location is.
Absolutely. Even though if it's legal, we can call it a duplex. If it's not legal, we do say that it is a in-law suite that can, you can generate income from your own family, but sometimes they don't. They, but I'm just trying to be legal the way I write it up. And but there are a lot of apartments in basements that probably aren't legal. Now, if we eliminated all that, we would have a lot more people on the streets not having a place to live. So I hope the city never goes to that point. But having a second unit in the house is definitely a bonus.
We've talked about this too, Ken, like the number of illegal suites or not legal suites that you renovate and help. There's a lot of them.
Well, hey, look, Hamilton's a very old city, right? Yeah. We have, thousands of illegal units that have been developed over the years. And it's only been the last 5 years that really we've had zoning bylaws in place that really allowed for these units to be legalized. And so now we're going back through and trying to legalize all these illegal units. I have a love-hate relationship with real estate listings. And because, I see clear as day, they say, oh, look at this, beautiful bungalow and has an in-law suite. Like, to me, that's a red flag that it's not a legal unit. Right. Because if it was legal, there's a lot of value there for it being legal, and it would be advertised as such that this is a legal basement income generating suite. And the reason these are more valuable, it's supply and demand, right? When we have a legal income-producing component to a house, more people can qualify for that mortgage. It's open now to multi-generational living, and there's more people that are looking for that type of product. And so, it kind of pushes up the value of the home. But the biggest thing is that there's a legal income there coming in. People can they can qualify for that mortgage based off of that legal income that suite is generating. So this is where I think it's hugely beneficial for these mom and pop investors, for the everyday homeowner, to look at their home, look at their space, and see, how can I make the best use of this space? How can I make this home work for me? Get more out of your home is our tagline. Making the best use of what we have to make life more affordable, make life easier, bring financial stability into our lives.
Rob, nowadays compared to pre-pandemic, are you noticing more and more people who are looking for a home say, listen, Rob, I need to have something that I can generate some income? Is there a legal second suite in this house?
Absolutely. We are getting a lot of demand for that. And we're finding that people, if it doesn't have it, they want to know that it can be converted to it. There's no doubt about it. Especially bungalows are the best ones. I'm sure you would say that, Ken. Bungalows are the best ones to buy and make an apartment in the basement. And like I said, it does help the homeowner get approved for a mortgage to buy a house with that second income. So now you got a husband and wife making money, and then you also have the income from the potential tenant. That makes a big difference with people buying homes and affording them.
Ken, do you get people wanting to renovate their space with the mindset of someday we're going to sell this and it's going to be more valuable?
Yeah, we've seen definitely a shift in the last year in our client base. Basically, your typical real estate investor has kind of shifted out of 2-unit houses or doing bungalows and basement apartments because there's not the same return on investment for that investor. The cash flow is not there. We're seeing a shift of now the homeowners coming into this space because they're doing it out of affordability reasons. They're doing it because they need to afford that mortgage and for their kids to have a place to live. So this multi-generational idea. And so it's been a huge shift, in those that are going out there and doing these secondary dwelling units.
Yeah, you mentioned the multi-generational, and we should not ignore that kids are staying at home a little bit longer, right? Into their 30s, sometimes a little bit longer than that, depending on their schooling or their job prospects, right?
I just had a consultation this week with, a boomer who's got some aging kids. They're just getting into university, and then they're going to be leaving university, and they're looking at their home, typical bungalow on the Hamilton Mountain. They want to put a full second story on it and make that a secondary dwelling unit, and also convert the basement into another unit so that both of their kids, once they graduate, have a place to live.
Wow. Let's get into garage units. So these are these detached garages. A lot of people are renovating these, making them into additional dwelling units. Ken, how active is this in Hamilton?
Yeah, it's definitely a growing interest in these types of units because people do have these kind of, again, underutilized spaces, such as a detached garage just sitting in their yard. Some of these garages are quite run down. Maybe they should be torn down. Some are very solid, well-built structures and ripe to be converted into a unit. And so it's not as difficult as people think to convert these garages. If you have a good solid structure, it's really, okay, we have to get services there. So like a sanitary lateral, like for the drainage, we have to get a water service line there for the water. And we have to either run gas or hydro. Obviously, we have to run hydro. And so and then you're just renovating the inside of the garage. Sometimes we take out the garage door and we put in a window or an entry door for natural lighting. And these can be amazing spaces. You can sometimes make them into a nice 1-bedroom unit if you have a bit of a larger garage, or they make for a great studio apartment or a bachelor apartment. I've had these debates at Committee of Adjustment before when we didn't have the zoning bylaws like we do now, and we had to apply for a Committee of Adjustment to convert a garage into a unit. And I had these debates with committee members about like the size of the unit. Like they're always complaining like, who would want to live in such a small unit? And my argument back to them is like, who are you to decide the minimum space that somebody needs to live? Like obviously we have minimum building code requirements, but we were battling minimum unit size under the zoning bylaw. And I always push back at them and say like, look, who are you to, maybe for you want to live in a nice 3-bedroom, single detached home, but there's lots of people who just desire to have a nice little studio apartment. That's all they need. Keep life simple, keep life affordable for them. So again, we're creating options for people. And some of these options are not for everybody, but we're just creating more options for people to live in different places.
Rob, when it comes to these garage units, and we're seeing a lot of them pop up around the city, is that a drawing card for would-be either investors or people buying homes?
Absolutely. When you're looking at a house and somebody's looking at buying, and if they see a separate unit in a garage or loft above the garage, it is a bonus. There's no doubt about it, and it does attempt the buyer to say, let's go with this because we have a separate apartment that we can rent out or we can have our kids live in, and definitely the garage units. I don't see them as much, but they're out there, and I think between like legal seconds, suites that are building these suites downstairs in basements and stuff. I think across Ontario, we're probably building more of those than actually builders are building houses. I'm assuming if you calculate everybody, like contractors like yourself, doing it across Ontario, do you think, I would assume that we're probably putting more units available for people to live in. I don't know the numbers. I'm curious to see what that number is.
Well, like I look at just our firm, for instance, and we've probably created and legalized over 800 units in the last 5 years. Versus, you try and think how long it takes to get a 800 unit subdivision built. That might take you 10, 15 years to do that, right? And so we can rapidly create a lot more housing by, doing secondary suites and ADUs and additional dwelling units. Because look, we have existing infrastructure, existing buildings that we can use. We're starting to see an increase interest or desire or push towards modular construction, especially in regard to the detached dwelling units, these garden suites and stuff. And so we're seeing, a lot more investment into the modular space. We saw some recent government announcements into some of these modular manufacturers to help, increase their manufacturing capacity for some of these modular units. But modular still has an inherent issue in the fact that you're still working with a prefab size. And especially on our urban lots where we have so many different configurations of lots and setbacks and space constraints and zoning bylaw constraints, it's not a golden solution, the modular stuff, but it's still stuff that every single client that we talk to, in consulting about these units, we look at all the pros and cons of all the different ways that you can build an ADU, and one option, like I said, there's lots of different options for how to go about and to build these units.
Are those modular prefab units, are they about the size of a one-car garage?
The modular stuff we're seeing is typically, if you're buying like a small modular unit in that 400 to 500 square foot range, you can get like bigger modular units that are like maybe 750, 800 square feet.
Right.
And it depends on how many segments, sometimes it might just be one modular segment, or they might bring in 2 or 3 modular segments and piece them together on site.
So interest rates, we think, are going to be creeping down this year. The Bank of Canada hasn't made that decision yet, but all signs are pointing to sometime in the spring, maybe in the summer at the very latest, that interest rates will come down. How's that going to affect, Ken, what you guys do on a day-to-day basis and what people out in this community are doing?
Well, kind of anticipation of potential rate cuts, right? Along with that comes increased confidence in the market. And with increased confidence, we're seeing people, look at re-entering the market with, purchasing properties and homes and undertaking renovations and this type of stuff. So we're starting to see, increasing activity. Rob, I'm sure you've seen some increasing activity in your office as well with as we head into the spring market. And with that, look, trades and contractors are going to get busy, and they're going to get busier as we start to see a rebound in the housing sector. And so, look, it's a great time right now to be planning for your project, to be, engaging a designer or consultant to kind of start that planning process, the designing process for your project, whether it's an interior renovation or if you're going to do a secondary dwelling unit or an addition to your home. It's a great time in the winter to be planning for that spring project.
Yeah, because it's not like you can snap your fingers and you're doing work tomorrow, right? You need permits, you need plans, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot that goes into it.
It takes time, right? There's definitely a process to go through. And municipalities aren't quick on the best of days. And so it does take time to go through these processes.
Rob, you wanted to make mention about a new kind of mindsets that house flippers, that investors are kind of having right now.
Yeah, there more of them are. I'm finding that they're putting that secondary suite in the basement. These house flippers right now, so they caught on to that we need more homes and more living space and more units, and so a lot of them are putting the secondary suite, and it's amazing. They are getting more money for the properties, for the renovations or the flip. There was one on Gage Street, and we got great money for it, and I couldn't believe, like, wow, like this is on Gage Street, busy area, just north of just between Barton and King.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, whoa, like they actually did pretty good on their price on a through street. It wasn't off a side street.
Right.
And it was like everything was done brand new inside, basement and main floor. And they did well. And because they put the secondary suite in there. Now, if it was just a regular renovation, I think they would have done well, but not as well as they did with the secondary suite.
And that's a big marketing. When you're listing this house, listen, this is not only renovated, but you also have an additional dwelling unit in the basement.
It made it affordable for somebody else to buy, and they'll have that secondary income.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to mention too is that for any potential home buyer out there, and you're looking on in the market for a house such as this that has a secondary dwelling unit, you really want to make sure that a building permit was pulled to create that unit, or else you don't actually have what you think you have. And sometimes I've seen people, they reach out to us to consult on they find out after the fact that, hey, look, actually this is not a legal unit. It wasn't done to code. And we go in and we do a consultation, and we find out that they have to rip out 3/4 of what was renovated in order to legalize, to get the proper fire separations in and proper window sizes. And you don't want to overpay for a finished renovation if a building permit wasn't pulled. So you got to do your due diligence.
Absolutely. We ask for that when we know it's a flip. We do ask for if there was a permit pulled for that. Absolutely.
Is that something that a home inspector would catch on to? Because I'm assuming a lot of the stuff's behind the walls, right?
Well, home inspector wouldn't catch that, but what we do know that is, if we know it's newly renovated, we want to know if there was a permit taken for that. That's for
So
sure.
in Hamilton here, it's very easy to find out. It's called a zoning verification report. And it should be part of any real estate transaction, in my opinion, is a zoning verification report. And what that does, you basically pay city staff to go through the records of the property to confirm what the current legal permitted use is of that property. And if a building permit was pulled in previous times to complete a renovation, it will come back through that zoning verification report, and they'll come back and say, look, this is a legal single-family dwelling with a secondary dwelling unit. So it's only a few $100s for a zoning verification report. Make it standard as part of your conditions.
Nice. In terms of popular renos this year, is anything trending, Ken, and what you guys are being asked to do?
We're definitely, it's a growing trend for more universal design when it comes to renovations and creating housing, creating spaces that are more universally accessible to many different types of people with many different types of, mobility issues or visual impairments or hearing impairments. So we're just trying to create spaces that are open to everybody. Why? Supply and demand.
Yeah.
We're seeing a huge shortage of homes for people with disabilities. It's a crisis in this province. And so I know our firm, we're doing a lot of work with Development Services Ontario, trying to help families create accessible spaces within their homes for their children that have disabilities. And so if you're out there, if you're a developer, if you're a housing provider, you're an investor, even a mom and pop investor, I would definitely take a look at your space and try and create an accessible space in your home.
Nice collaboration today from Ken Beekendam and Rob Golfi here on the Building Hamilton Show. That's it for us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And thank you for listening to the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Beekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML.